Morning. Well, that light is super bright. Thank you. You guys are the true heroes here at the very end of the conference. So thank you for sticking around till the end. And I'm always excited to see you and exhausted by today. I also get a little bummed out because this means that everybody's going to head home and I won't get to see y'all till next year. So stick around after our closing keynote because we're going to be doing drawing and for a free NAGW membership. We also have a couple other giveaways, and then we're going to also do our NAGW genealogy and kind of look at the different vintage shirts that people are wearing. So our closing keynote is currently the CSS for Ativo Networks, and is working on a number of projects within the deception and services space. Over the years, he's founded or worked with a number of companies specializing in darknet research, intelligence gathering, cryptography, deception technologies, and providers of security services and threat intelligence. Since the late 90s, Chris has been deeply involved with security R&D, consulting, and advisory services in his quest to protect and defend businesses and individuals against cyber attack.
Oh God, don't worry about going through the rest of that crap.
Please join me in welcoming Chris Roberts.
I keep forgetting sometimes. I've got a bio and it just covers a whole bunch of stuff. And I always forget how long the stupid thing is. I'm like, the easiest way is like, look, it's the hacker. So, that brings up a good point. Congratulations, you invited a hacker to your conference. We're the friendly ones. We'll have these conversations. So, yeah, good morning. Welcome to a soggy Salt Lake City. Woke up this morning, I'm like, there's rain here. We're based in Colorado, so I'm like, I'm not used to wet stuff coming out of the air. All right, we're gonna have a little bit of fun with this one. Evolution of cyber off the edge of the cliff, as it says. Now, before we do that, let us take, I feel like I'm getting some feedback. It might just be the bloody beard. Let's take a little step back to our childhood. Does everybody remember the kettle discussion with the parents, or the stove discussion? Don't touch the kettle because it's hot. Don't touch the stove or the oven because it's hot. What did we do? Touch the damn thing. Yay! Then to our teenage years. What do we do in our teenage years? Well, that looks like a bloody good idea. Let's follow everybody else off the edge of the cliff. And we all got yelled at collectively, or we tried to blame one person, depends on who that person was. And then we look at our adult life. It can really be summed up by one thing. The conversation today is about humans. Yes, we're going to talk about technology. Yes, we're going to talk about challenges in security. But I came out of jumping out of airplanes for a living. And apparently we cost a lot more to train than the machines do. So we're a little bit more important apparently, even though they don't always tell us this. Now here's the logic for some of these conversations. Because if I tell you something, as humans, we typically aren't good at listening. If I explain it, you actually might listen. You might pay attention. Doesn't mean you can do anything about it, but you might actually pay attention for it at the moment. Now, if you experience it, you might actually change. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the problem is, then we get blamed. We get blamed for not telling you about things. You get blamed because the users are like, well, you didn't tell me. Yes, I did bloody tell you about this. I told you about it 6 months ago, or 12 months ago, or 2 years ago, and you didn't sodding well listen. And now you've fallen off the edge of the damn cliff. You're looking at me going, why didn't you tell me about the edge of the stupid thing? So here's the problem. It leaves us like this. Our user population, us, technology, all these other things. Here's some of the challenges and the reasons why. We've got 7.5 billion people on this planet. We don't get along with each other, let's be perfectly honest. We shrank the world. You know, you think about it, years ago, I was actually arguing and having some fun with somebody the other day. We're talking about, you know, when did we make the mistake And the mistake was when we started moving away from carrier pigeons. And other people think we made the mistake when we actually came out of the trees. And there were some who were like, no, we should never have left the bloody oceans. And we start looking at taking a step back on this one. And then the challenge is, as technologists, we've handed so many devices to all of these people. There'll be about 26 billion devices in the hands of that population. And we still have password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as the most commonly used one. Splendid. So, what do we do about it? How do we actually start to think about these challenges? Well, let's do the easy one. We all have to collaborate. Now, security, IT, InfoSec, whatever the hell you want to call me, we suck at collaborating. We haven't done a very good job of it, which is why we need to change. We being all of us. We talked about this, and I'll probably touch on this a bunch more times. All of us, and I chose that picture for a bloody good reason, we need diversity in thought. One of the comments I had here that I'll touch on a little bit more. Here's the logic for this. Years ago, it was a mainframe in a room. The worst it could do was print something out on a dot matrix printer incorrectly. And as an attacker, the best I could do was try to get into the door of the mainframe and try not to get shot at by the person that was guarding the sodding door. That was good 20, 30, 40 years ago. When we screw up nowadays, people die. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You look at the stuff that's happened on the 737s, you look at the stuff that we're putting into humans from the embedded technology. Some of the stuff I'm working on at the moment with EEG technology, nano and biotech. We fuck up, people die. We've put technology everywhere. And so this is where we unfortunately end up. The past was okay. There wasn't too much problems. Present, it's still really iffy. But we look at the future of where technology is going, and as our industry, especially the security part of the industry, we're out of the toddler stage, not much more than that. But unfortunately, we have the keys to the kingdom. We want to do anything, challenges are, we probably can do it, which isn't a good thing. And so, we have a lot of things to think about. And as it says, we're kind of going off the edge of the cliff. Unfortunately, backwards. Friend finder, 400 million breached. We're going off the cliff in flames. Starwards, 500 million breached. Sure as hell don't have a parachute. 1 billion breached. And everybody's like, okay, you know, the big numbers, crazy numbers, but let's be honest, really, you're just making shit up. How many of you remember the Yahoo breaches? Yay, 3 billion. Okay, over a number of years, including the times when they're like, oh no, everything's fine, we're buff. Quick, burn the shit. We've had that a few times in our past, haven't we? Let me get to this. Everybody loves social media. Everybody loves social media, and then we all wonder why people can do spear phishing against us, direct attacks against us when we put everything on the bloody internet. And I mean everything. Part of my job, as you probably imagined, is attacking companies, breaking into them. It's kind of fun to do. But more often than not, I don't have to. Because people have put code on the internet. They're using open source code on GitHub. They've put questions on forums that we, being the attackers, are very nice. We'll answer those questions. Be like, oh, absolutely, we can help you with your code. If you just give me a sample of the code, we'll do it for you. Years ago, it worked really, really well. I had a database, and we would collect Cisco configs. And we ended up with over 750,000 of them at one point in time, before we got told to quit that shit and stop collecting them. Because it was great. You go onto the Cisco forums and people are like, you know, I got a problem with my Cisco router, I can't. Oh, just drop the config, we'll take a look at it for you. What do? Drop config, send it to us. It's got the secrets for the passcode right in there. Yay, thanks. Or as humans, we like patterns. How many of you have got a smartphone? How many of you have got Bluetooth turned on at the moment? Thank you. How many of you used the wireless in the hotel last night? The open wireless that has no password? Much appreciated. Thank you very much for your contributions to my database. Actually, it's more the music I'm after these days, more than anything else. So let's take another step back. Well, we're spending lots of money in security. Yes, $124 billion will be spent on the security industry this year. And what have we got to show for it? Let's just, January this year, globally, we lost 1.76 billion pieces of information. We suck. I mean, we're useless. That was just January globally. That actually, I was over at Cyber Week in Israel, and that's the cyber dictatorship. I shouldn't really say it that way, should I? We are being recorded on this, aren't we? Oh well, c'est la vie. Anyway, lots of data getting lost. So the question obviously is, what the hell are we spending the money on? Well, we'll make it simple. Yay, conferences. If you want to go to an information security conference every single day of the freaking year, you can do it. You never attend work and conference. It's freaking ridiculous. And not only are we spending it on conferences, we're spending it on the marketing. And let's face it, most of the vendors are lying to us. 100% secure website. Bullshit. The best anti-hacking software. It doesn't exist. Let's just keep it simple. If a vendor comes up to you and says they can keep you secure, you are allowed to taser them. That's just, okay? If they tell you they have an anti-hacking software, not only can you taser them, but you can actually put them in a paddling pool. And you get one prong, it doesn't matter if you put it in the groin or the forehead, I really don't care, and the other prong goes into the paddling pool. I actually came up with an entire list of exactly what you can do. The new tasers have got 3 prongs on them, they're really good, so you can share it with a friend. This shit's got to stop. And I'm serious. You get vendors coming up to you telling you can keep your code safe and their code secure, you are allowed to taser them. Do it publicly. Video it, put it up on YouTube. And then we have to look at the very people that we are meant to be protecting. Let's just go through a couple of examples. When you have to tell people, tweet after leaving the burning building, and the sign that's down in Florida, don't molest the crocodile. I'm like, what the fuck's sakes? And we have to tell people which end of the chainsaw is dangerous. This is the audience that we have to deal with. These are the people that we have to explain two-factor authentication, or multi-factor, or CASB, or what the hell the cloud is apart from the next rainstorm. We are screwed. Which is why we have this. We're back to humans. We're back to experiences. And the problem is with some of this, even though I tell you, or I try to explain to you, or I try to help you, and go, hey, you might not want to touch the kettle, it's hot, don't touch the stove. We still do it, because we have to experience as humans. Security, and a lot of IT in general, shouldn't just be us talking of technology and risk. We need psychologists working with us. The best I can probably do it is a very former Borg drone. Said it quite nicely. 7 of 9. Look it up, it's actually kind of cool. We're erratic, conflicted, and disorganized. Every decision is debated. There's some merit to that. Every action questioned. And every individual entitled to their own opinion. No, I don't necessarily agree with that sometimes. But the challenge I have is we lack cohesion. And that's where the problem is. There's a big movement in the industry now for DevOps and DevSecOps. And that's because we can't fix all of this on our own. Now, we've screwed up from a security standpoint. Part of the reason I'm standing here going, oops, and sorry. We can't fix it all, and our approach has been bloody awful. We've come in as the special snowflakes and gone, you've got to listen to us, you have to do everything that we say. Bullshit. We have to collaborate. And we all have to have a voice to some degree. So, let's wrap up the first part. So let's get it simple. We're obviously putting more complex technology. It isn't getting any simpler. When we had the cloud, which is, let's face it, somebody else's unused data center, that was simple. Then we decided to virtualize it. Then we decided to add containers and Dockers and God only knows what to the stupid thing. Now we're virtualizing all of that and we've got more acronyms than we know. Actually, we've got more acronyms than the government, I think, at this point in time. I was actually hanging out with the Guard last week and I'm listening to a conference and a conversation. I'm like, you know what, I think we've got about as many acronyms as you buggers have these days. But then we're handing it to a population that doesn't necessarily understand the consequences of what they have. Now there's an argument to say they shouldn't have to, that we should have done a better job. But like anything, power comes responsibility. So there has to be a level of education somewhere. We're putting it everywhere. I mean, let's be perfectly honest. No longer is it on the desktop or on the computer or on the system. Now it's in the pocket. Now it's in the car. How many of you have got the smarter type of cars? The ones with the integrated system or the Apple Play or whatever the heck everybody else is. Yeah, they're great. They take about 30 seconds to hack. A couple of minutes on some cases. And we've got some fun toys that we're using to break them with these days. And we sure as hell don't have enough people. We know that one. IT as a whole is having challenges with getting enough good people in. Now, my argument on some of that one is we're not necessarily looking in the right bloody places. And we don't have good eyes. Shit's happening, we have no clue what's going on. And then we come to us, IT and InfoSec specifically. I always argue with people. In fact, it doesn't take much of an argument. Typically it just says, give me 10 minutes and a laptop and I'll show you. But it's simple. We can get into anything we want. I don't care what defenses you have. I don't care what intrusion detection, prevention, technology, web application, firewall, all that crazy crap that you can have. We're going to get in. As a hacker, you can't stop me. End of conversation. The challenge is, what do you do when I'm on the inside? And how do you know? So I'll take a step back. Everybody doing okay? By the way, this is a slightly somber, oh, there's my water, I knew I put it down somewhere. Slightly somber topic, but it really isn't. There's actually some fun in here too. You get to taser vendors. How much more fun can you have than that? Seriously, video it, please. All right, let's look at our history. Let's look at how the hell did we get here? Well, the origins of the digital evolution. Man and technology. Let's beat our chest for 30 seconds, shall we? And go, oh, it is man and its computers and its technology. Yeah, fucking bullshit. This was the early years. Now, for those of you that are close enough to the front, what's missing? Men! Yay! Yeah, we screwed it up, let's be perfectly honest. Shit worked back then. So what happened? Well, let's take a little bit of history. Yes, the male genius came into being. The video games, the targeted, everything. Let's be perfectly honest. Not only that, when the IT department and computer science came together, computer science was seen as special. And it's got to have its own building, its own people. We're going to put them all in a little room. We're going to make them all look special and crazy. By the way, for any of you that are building sites or doing stuff like that, and you decide to use the picture of a hooded person with a freaking hoodie up and a mask on and gloves on to depict an adversary or a criminal, yeah, you will incur my wrath online. Okay? Find a different freaking graphic for a hacker. So, advertising. The whole lot. And then we had this shit. Knowledge is power. I must control it. I must hold on to it. I must build my little fiefdom. God, if you have that inside your company, give me their name, I will taser them. I have no problems doing that. So, this is where we need to be. We have to bring the balance back. We really have to bring the balance back. We also need to change the freaking equation as well. Knowledge and action is power, not knowledge equals power. And it's going to start with all of us. Let's be perfectly honest on this one. From an IT and an InfoSec standpoint, there's a lot of us out there doing the best we can to bring a diversity of thoughts in. To bring diversity of age, religion, the whole bloody lot. Race, color, creed, limbs, eye color, you freaking name it. And there's logic for this, aside from the obvious stuff. There's obviously the movement towards actual artificial intelligence. In other words, how can I get the computer to be more like us, which is a scary thought. The problem is, at the moment, let's be perfectly honest, most of the hands on the keyboards are the white middle-aged male. That's not a good start for an artificial intelligence system. Okay? So, those of you that are not white middle-aged males, please do everything you can to encourage others into this industry. Those of you that are white middle-aged males, get the fuck out of the way. And that's the nicest way I can put it. So, we need people who care. This is the other problem with our industry. $124 billion is getting spent on this industry. As security professionals, we have one job to do. It's to protect. Simple as that. We have charges that we are responsible for. Every single person in the organization, arguably, it's our job to try to help make sure their asses don't get handed to them. It is not to mint the next millionaire. That is another problem with our industry. So, we've broken everything. Safety and security is a mess. At this point, the hell do we do? Not exactly the best environment to be in. So let's talk a bit about that. This is where we need to be. It isn't just collaboration among humans, it's collaboration with technology. So let's talk about communications. Your new telephone, the embedded telephone, the technology that's coming down the line as far as this goes, is actually some of the stuff I'm working on with some folks over in DC, is how do we integrate communication. But the problem is, to be able to integrate communication, we actually have to understand what communication is. We have to understand how to talk with each other, not to each other. We have to understand how we communicate. And again, as security and as IT, that very same message that we take to our people in our industry, we have to take to the business. How do I explain what I'm trying to do to a user, to a manager, and then into the boardroom? We have to be able to communicate in a language that everybody else understands. That's been one of the problems we've had. By the way, I know there's pictures being taken of the slides. A, it's being recorded, and B, I will make sure that these slides are totally available to everybody here, so that you can take the vendor one, staple it to their forehead, and then taser them. This is the big one. Again, as IT, and especially as InfoSec, we've been really good at explaining everything in a language that we're comfortable with. We haven't been good at explaining it in a way the business understands. So we have to get much better at helping the business understand, and we've got to learn their language. Cooperation. Yeah. Let's talk smart cities. There's about half of the smart cities that I'm kind of engaged and involved in trying to break bits and help them fix bits. This, obviously, is where we're heading to. Everything from smart metering systems to all the vehicles, and not just vehicle stuff, but vehicle to infrastructure, infrastructure to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian, pedestrian to wherever the hell they're wandering with their head in their telephone. All of this is coming together. All of this is going to take all of us to make it work effectively. Not how we're doing it at the moment. Coordination. This one's the fun one. So this is some stuff I've been working on for the last couple of years. This is Biotech and Nanotech. The bottom right-hand side is actually gold carbon-based molecular systems that in 2016 we actually started to teach them how to recognize things. 2017 we actually got them to the stage where they could recognize individual chemical elements in the body. 2018 we started encoding them to do stupid shit like this. Now you can actually build a microarchitecture inside a body that can go around and recognize certain elements in a body. Needless to say, really good for medicine. And when somebody hacks it, really good for hacking a body. This is collaboration. This is where we have to get it right. You look on the left-hand side and all of the embedded technology that we're looking at putting into humans. Needless to say, that is going to have a huge impact on all sorts of interesting stuff, let alone the back-end technology to manage it, to support it, to deal with it. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, the top right-hand side is a turbocharged sperm. Yay! You want to pick the sperm you want, you can actually wrap a carbon nanotube around it, induce it with 2 different types of wavelengths, and the stupid thing goes really quickly. It's kind of fun to watch it in a petri dish. All good fun. Collaboration. Let's talk about augmented intelligence. All right, quick question. How many of you are coders and programmers in here? Got it. How many of you get fed up with the conversation about artificial intelligence? Yeah. So I've got an easy way to explain it. So when somebody says, hey, are you building AI? After slapping them with a wet fish, I'll give you a simple way to explain it. So if you break it down, there are 4 stages. There's programming, okay? You tell a program to go from point A to point B. The program goes, I got you covered. Goes from point A to point B. Now, if you look at machine learning, you turn around and say, look, I want you to get to point B, but I'm going to put some fuzzy logic in here, and I'm going to let you bounce around the barriers, but get your ass over there. So you go, okay, and the program just bounces across the barriers a few times, doesn't go off the edge, and ends up at point B. You're happy. You've got machine learning. Congratulations. Augmented intelligence is when you take the barriers away and you go, look, I actually would love you to get to point B, but you know, we all know you need to get to point Z. Z, not Z, by the way. Colonials, all this kind of good conversation. 1700s, you know. I've been here for 20 years, and one of my best friends is a Nebraska boy, and he makes me look small, wears overalls all the time. First time I ever met him, he was disassembling a gun in a friend's garage. And I walk in, and I'm like, only in this fucking country would that happen. He just turned around, he's like, we kicked your ass out several hundred years ago, shut up, limey. We've been best friends ever since, and that shit never stops, it's fun. Augmented intelligence. You tell it you want it to go to point B, and eventually point Z, and it goes, I got you covered. It bounces a few times, and then eventually it's like, I made it. You're like, okay, great, I've got augmented. If somebody turns around and tries to explain artificial intelligence to you, especially a security vendor that says, we've built artificial intelligence into our solution, if that solution doesn't wake up in the morning, doesn't demand a cup of coffee before it starts, doesn't question its own reality, doesn't ask why B can't come to A, and by the way, B smells, doesn't do all of these things, it's not artificial intelligence. It's programming with marketing. That's it. Again, taser the vendor. So let's think about this. This isn't a technology argument or discussion that we're having to have. It's a human one. This is all about every aspect of our lives that we're putting technology into. Everything from how we start life to obviously end of life. Some of the stuff I'm working on at the moment is actually some fun stuff with EEGs and seeing if I can actually eventually retire into a machine at some point in time. So some fun, crazy stuff I'm playing with. So, it's a human problem. So the question is, what do we do about it? Well, let's start off with the easy one. We have to fix the basics. What do I mean by the basics? Well, this is some of it. Let's talk about the human. How many of you go through mandated government user awareness training? Hopefully everybody. Go on, wake up, put your phones down. Cool. All right. Is it once a year?
Nope.
Is it any use?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, it's fucking, I mean, seriously, we spend half an hour at most teaching our people don't click shit and don't send shit. And yet we break our American football programs down into 15-second slices because we can't remember anything more than that. And yet you do this once a year and expect people to remember it for the next 364 days. We set ourselves up to fail. We pass the audit because we do training, but we don't actually do anything. Nobody understands the balance either. So here's my logic on this one. Let's fix the human and let's change the conversation. Let's talk about safety. As humans, we understand safety. 65,000 years ago, we stuck our heads out of a cave and we got eaten by anything else that had teeth bigger than us. Even these days, in certain parts of the world, the country, including this one sometimes, safety comes first. So why are we trying to talk about security? Something you can't actually quantify. Safety is you're either alive or you're not. Doesn't get any simpler than that one. So when we have the conversations with the users, and by the way, take this back to whoever the hell runs your security team, and tell them the big, scary, tall, weird thing that stood at the front of the stage with an odd accent gave us some other ideas. If you don't like it, hit him up on LinkedIn and argue with him, not with me. But here's an example. January. What is it in the US in January? It's tax season, yes? Why don't we put something out to all the user population going, hey, don't click on the IRS PDF. It's probably payloaded, and no, they're not going to come around in a black van and arrest you. It's February, Valentine's Day. Nobody loves you on the internet. Don't click the stupid Valentine's card. March Madness. Don't click the spreadsheet. And we keep going. We're back to school. I'm assuming, for any of you that have Rugrats, they went back to school, God, when did mine go back? Like 3 weeks ago? So September, October time frame. Don't click the 10% off Target coupon for back to school supplies. These are safety conversations. How many of you got mobile phones? Probably most of you, I'd imagine. You are mandated to put a password on. So what do? You begrudgingly put a password on. You can do the stuff that they did in the White House, which was 11111111, which worked spectacularly. Or you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 3, 5, 7, 20, or 2580, or the first 6 digits of your social security, or the first 6 digits of the telephone number if you're feeling really creative. We like habits. But if I help you understand that device connects you to your family, to your kids, to your parents, to your significant others, and I help you understand that you need to be safer with that device to keep yourself safe, that's a much easier conversation than standing there as the organization, the government, saying, put a fucking password on it, otherwise I'm firing you, sorry ass. Big difference. Safety, not security. And not punitive. So, second back to basics. For those of you that have a network background, if your network is flat and you can see everywhere on it, you don't need any kind of advanced security protection. If it's still running Windows XP in various areas, you don't need anything sophisticated. If you have a vendor that says that they can't upgrade their software because it will break everything, after you've tasered a couple of their people, then you can have the conversation about you are the client and you actually have the demand and the right to have the shit upgraded, otherwise the 6'3" hairy thing's going to taser them too. When you have remote desktop protocol open to the internets, you don't need sophistication. You just need to fix the basics. There are simple solutions for every single one of these. Network segmentation, VLAN segmentation, separation, simple firewall rules, using a bloody VPN. This is simple stuff. It does not mean that we have to go chasing all the new technology. This stuff means people are going to roll their sleeves up and just get the basic grunt work done. Because there is no easy button in security, unfortunately, despite how many people spend so much money trying to find one of the stupid things. This is one of my favorites. You don't have a perimeter. Many of you probably already know that, but unfortunately this is something we have to explain to the business, and probably to elements of IT. It doesn't exist. End of discussion, end of story, have a nice day. Your data's everywhere. It happened basically when you moved it off the ruddy mainframe. When you wake up in the morning, and the first thing you reach for is your mobile phone. The next thing that happens is the coffee machine wakes up because it's whatever stupid hour of the morning. It's probably already talked to the fridge, realized you don't have enough good milk left. It's arguing with the ruddy microwave, and by the way, the car's pissed off because it's raining outside and it's going to get wet. And they're all interconnected because you've got, you know, mesh or IoT, or you've then got the smart home. How many of you have got Alexas at home? Okay, take the sodding things out and shoot them, please. Actually, I shouldn't say that because we've all been carrying recording devices around for like 10 years, let's be honest. When the vendor comes in and they try to, do we have any vendors in here, or is this just all normal people? I shouldn't say that. I actually am from a vendor, let's be perfectly honest. Okay, when they try to sell you next generation shit, not only do you get to taser them, you ask to have a meeting with the marketing department, and you can taser those buggers too. Because it's last year's tech with a new blinky light and better marketing, let's be honest. This is the biggie. For those of you that are building things and designing things, as somebody who has to do forensics, we need eyes. We need eyes on the inside. I need to understand what you've built, what it's doing, what the errors are, what the problems are, and I need it logging somewhere, preferably to an event log monitoring system that actually works and somebody's paying attention to. Oy vey. All right. Okay, where the hell do we start on this one? All right, for 25 years we've been bitching, screaming, and yelling about passwords, possibly slightly longer than that, and let's be honest, we've gotten absolutely nowhere. When you start looking at the top 10 passwords for the last like 3 or 4 years, how many of you are on LinkedIn? All right. For those of you that follow me, hi. For those of you that don't, you might want to keep an eye on some of the craziest shit that I post out every now and again. The reason is I talk about a lot of this stuff on a regular basis because I try to give as much info as I can. But somebody put a post out where they actually compared like the last 4 years worth of passwords, and the top 10 passwords have literally just shifted a little bit, and I think 1 through 6 is still number 1. And I'm like, I hate people. But the challenge is we haven't really given anybody a good alternative. All we've done is put a band-aid on top of it and said, oh, you need to use longer passwords. Why? Well, because you do, because we can break the shit. You need to use more passwords. You need to use complex passwords. Uppercase, lowercase, special characters. Well, you can't use all the special characters because those bastards that are the hackers can break into our freaking database with half the special characters. So you can only use some special characters. And you can't use Unicode because they can break in with that shit. Arseholes. It's fun. When you come across the website, there's like, you can use special characters. The first thing I put in is a SQL select statement. It is amazing how often that works. And I can use everybody else's passwords. 2-factor. It ain't perfect, but it sure as hell helps. How many of you are administrators on some of your local systems that want to admit to it to the hacker in the room? Do you use the same user ID, or do you have an administrator user ID? Because if you use the same user ID, thank you very much. I appreciate your donation to my database. The database in question, there's about 4 of us out of Germany that run a database. We actually feed it into Have I Been Pwned, privacyrights.org, and a bunch of other places. We have about 16, somewhere between 16 and a half and 17 billion passwords in that database. It's actually user accounts and passwords. We harvest them all off the internet, we put them in the database, and then we just giggle. All of your users do not need to have local administration privileges. Please make it go away. It makes my job too easy. All of your admins need to be separated. And your developers, as much as I love them, please don't hard code things into it. And especially don't hard code it and put it up on bloody GitHub, for crying out loud. Because we harvest GitHub on a regular basis. It's not perfect. We're working on solutions for passwords. I think I actually talk about this a little bit more. Education. It comes down to talking to users. Rather than telling them, you have to do this, help them understand why. We talked about passphrases. I flew in last night, so we were up in one of the rooms talking about passphrases at like 1 o'clock this morning. It was awesome. But then help them understand the differences. To say, hey, let's break your life into 4 quadrants. When you walk into, Kroger's or King Soopers and they're like, hi, we'll give you 10% if you give us your entire identity, and you give them a fake email account or a fake telephone number, and you remember it. That goes in that bottom right-hand quadrant. That's the crap you give to anybody that's giving you 10% off coupons. So that's like, Fred Smith at yahoo.com and a telephone number that redirects them to some nasty place in Outer Mongolia. So you can use that. Then that next quadrant is, stuff I kind of care about. So your online, your Amazon account, and all the other kind of stuff. That's that next quadrant. You want to protect that stuff a little bit more effectively. Then you get up into this quadrant. And this quadrant of life has maybe got personal information, banking information, financial information, your life, your taxes, all that stuff is in that quadrant. You want to protect that stuff and make sure that identity sets you feel, is actually well secured. Then you have work. And that's an entirely different quadrant. And that quadrant never touches the other quadrants. The passwords, the user IDs, all the shit that you use in there, stop using that user account on bloody Craigslist, or on Amazon, or on eBay, or on any of these other ones. Help people understand breaking your life into those 4 quadrants. And help them understand why. And then help them teach the kids. All right. Shit's gonna happen. The attacker, the adversary, nation state, board script kiddie is going to get in. Have a plan. Because you don't want to be building a plan while the building is burning down. You don't want to be calling 1-800-forensics when all of your computers have got the nice little red screen that says, please send half a Bitcoin to this address. Not only get a plan in place, but actually test the stupid thing. Have some fun, make it light, do it over lunch, bring coffee and donuts in for people, but test the plan. Make it easy, make it simple, so that when something happens, you kind of know what you're doing. You also know who to call, because you've been sitting in the same room sharing coffee and donuts for a while. My favorite. For those of you who do follow me, I have a penchant for tasers and for blinky shit, neither of which, well, let's have some fun. Let's blame the French for a minute. Anybody know what this is? The Maginot line in France. For those of you that know your history, it was built before the Second World War. It was an amazing defensive system. It was actually built on the east coast of France. So you got France and Germany, and Germany gets a little uppity on a regular basis. And so France was like, we'll fox those cunning Germans, we'll build this amazing defensive system. And they built it for miles. And it was brilliant, and it had turrets and shit and tunnels and crap and tanky things and lots of places for humans. What did the Germans do? They walked up to it and went, well, that sucks, and went straight round it and over the top of it. Yay! The modern equivalent of the Maginot Line is this. It's the firewall, and IDS, and IPS, and DLP, and HIDS, and Oauth, and all the other damn things that you can cram into one of these bloody expensive chassis. Okay? They don't stop shit. They're really nice, they're really cool, they keep some things out-ish, but those of us that like them get right past them. Now, this is not a political statement, but you can read into it whatever you want. But for the last several thousand years, and it's actually more than 4,000, it's like 12,000, I did a whole bunch more research on this, we've put walls up. Man, it's back to man again, isn't it? Man has gone, I need to wave my willy in the air, I'm going to build a wall. And what happens? The stupid thing comes tumbling down. What do? We can go back to Albert for a minute. We have taken the physical equivalent of a wall, we've put it into the digital world, and we expect different results. That isn't going to happen. Sorry. I ate something for breakfast, and I think something bit back. I'm actually losing bits of a tooth, which is fantastic. So, there's an example of this, and this is kind of the realm on the world that I'm working in these days. As an adversary, I have a big toolbox. In fact, I probably have the biggest toolbox out there. As an attacker, I have all the tools known to mankind. I have all the attack tools, I have all the sniffing tools, all the monitoring tools. Most of it because it's all open source. So I basically have the ability to bring all of this technology to bear to attack you. And, as it says there, I've only got to get it right once. I've only got to get somebody to click on something, somebody to plug in a USB drive, somebody to let me in the front door, somebody to drive by my website. Here's the problem from the defender's standpoint. It ain't pretty at all. Back to the problem is, in our industry, that $124 billion is trying to make a lot of people a lot of money as opposed to protecting a lot of people. And not only do we have to rely on technology, we have to put the policies and the procedures and the controls in place, which we tend to forget. So, this is about the current state of the union. The only advantage, as it says at the bottom, is that the dam of data that keeps blowing up in our face probably puts the dumpster fire out. And that's about it. Now, this unfortunately is a busy slide. I apologize. I still have to do some editing on it. But we talk about the human attack. We talk about the focus. Now let's talk about who's getting hit. 80% of companies, or greater, are getting hit with phishing attacks. Email, still the easiest way of getting in. Still get people to click on stuff. Social media, 60%. Credential compromises. Why is this so high? Because we keep finding credentials. A good example, actually without putting people's hands up, those of you that do password reuse. Let me give you an example. If I find one of your passwords online, I have a program that runs through 155 I think these days, different websites. So let's say you've used your password in, I don't know, who got breached last? I don't know, pick on a retail. Let's pick on Best Buy again, it's kind of fun. So I find your password for Best Buy, or I find your password for the Sheraton. You signed up for Sheraton points. And being a good hotel, they're a good custodian of it until somebody breaches it, and it got leaked. If you've used that password anywhere else, a banking site, a financial site, a healthcare site, another hotel site, Amazon, eBay, all of the other ones, I've got a program that goes through and just runs all the variables against those sites. Invariably, we'll find other accesses into it. But, you know, we got cybersecurity. Yay! So let's talk about this one for a second. Do something different. It's an attitude thing. So from our stuff, and what I'm messing around with, is we're trying to give blue some teeth. The logic here is simple. As an attacker, I will always get in. As a defensive system, we need to help those teams more effectively. It's like penetration testing. For those of you who've gone through a pen test, and is anybody here from Iowa? I think I asked that question earlier. Oh, good. You know the shenanigans that's going on in your neck of the woods with coal-fire? No. Do you know who the sheriff is over there? Nope. Okay. Damn it. We have some problems going on in Iowa with another team. I was hoping somebody would know the sheriff because I want them to go slap him. So here's the logic on this one. We need to give blue some teeth. The defensive teams need more help. This comes back to collaboration. This comes back to everybody working together more effectively. Back to the DevSecOps, the DevOps movements, and all those other good things. So this is the stuff we're messing around with. We're messing around with deception technology. And it's simple. It's the art of lying to you in a digital realm. Or another way of putting it is the wolf in sheep's clothing. Here's the logic. On the left-hand side, let's face it, for the last 20 or 30 years, we've been able to get into any environment we want, do anything we want, have fun with whatever we feel like we need to have fun with. On the right-hand side, if we start building deception and detection capabilities more effectively, we start running into more wolf in sheep's clothing. If we actually start looking at the playbook, let's face it, as an attacker, I've always had the advantage. Back to the I only need to get lucky once, you have to be able to defend 100% of the time. Doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So this is something we use, and this is something for those of you that are on the coding, the programming, the development, the web side of things, which I'm assuming most of you are. As an attacker and as a defensive system, I would encourage you, if you don't know what the Mitre Framework is, go check it out. It actually is a 12-step methodology for basically how to break in. There are the 12 steps. What somebody did is they took a whole bunch of us over the last 5-10 years, and they've helped everybody understand how we work. If you understand how we work and how we attack, you can much more successfully understand how to defend. Now, the other option is changing the symmetry bit. From our standpoint, if you throw deception in and detection capabilities in, especially if you do it properly, you have the ability now to disrupt an attacker. You have the ability to camouflage security in among everything. Gets it kind of fun. Here's the logic for some of the stuff that we're building at the moment. And again, it's a busy slide, so I apologize. Up till this point, I've been able to land on any of your computers and ask them anything I want. If I get you to click on something or I get you to do something, more often than not, no matter whether you've got endpoint detection or whatever else it is, we can typically bypass most of it. And at that point in time, I'm sitting on your computer. I can get a reverse shell out, or I can just have a couple of programs running in the background that ask all the awkward questions. What user credentials do you have? Please send them to me. What other accounts do you have? Drop them out to me. What interesting documents do you have? Zip them up, send them to me. Where are you on the network? And this is where it gets interesting. If we build a detection system or a deception system effectively, as the attacker starts to ask these questions, we can actually build a system that answers back effectively. Schrodinger's cat, quantum mechanics, and some fun stuff like that. The whole act of observing something means you change its state. As an attacker, I have to ask questions to understand where I am when I'm in your network. If I ask questions and you've built a defensive system properly, those answers that come back are basically payloaded. They'll tell the attacker, hey, you're in the network and here's something really cool to go look at, and it blows up in their face. or the merest action of asking the question sets off the alarms. It's kind of what we're building and what we're up to at the moment. I'll deploy that one. So this is the fun stuff. This is how we're messing around with it on networks, and this is where we're starting to look at how do we change. How do we not just put another bloody firewall in or another IDS or IPS? How do we do something different? How do we change your network from looking like a bloody welcome mat to actually something that can fight back effectively? Basically, the logic here is simple. Up till this point, from a security and safety and IT standpoint, we've always been reactive. When something happens, we have to react to fix it. Well, let's change the symmetry. Let's not necessarily go on the offensive, because that never ever works. But let's at least get a little bit more predictive over how we do things. Let's actually start to put some nasty little traps inside a network. So as you're building environments, as you're putting environments together, start thinking, how can you actually go, hey, this works, but how could you put separate credentials in there? When somebody comes to talk to you about deception, how can you effectively go, yeah, you know, we can build another site that looks just like this, or credentials, or systems, or shares, or networks. Because at the end of the day, your defensive system doesn't need to look like a defensive system. It needs to look like anything else on the network. Because as the attacker, I need to look around the entire room. I'll see diversity, which is what I'll find in your network, but nothing stands out and nothing blends in too much, nothing looks too shiny, everything looks the same. And the only way I know the difference is if I start asking the questions. The merest act of doing that means something should blow up in my face. This one's busy, I apologize, I put it together yesterday. By the way, for those of you that don't want to use the hooded hacker and get yelled at by me on the internet, the top left-hand side pirate will work perfectly. There's a bunch of us that are starting to mess around with some of that stuff, it's kind of fun. Alright, so I'm going to fast forward through that one. Here's the logic, again. We have gotten to the state in this industry where we are mapping out exactly what attackers do. Great, we understand some of this. Now why don't we go on the, not necessarily the offensive, but why don't we start looking proactively and going, how can we block and tackle effectively? Again, you won't stop me from getting in. Snowball's chance in hell, and any vendor that tells you that you will stop me from getting in really does need to be taken out and tasered a long time. In a pool, naked, staked to the ground. So that's the logic on how we're trying to change things. All right, so wrapping it up. Yeah, I know, the squirrels. I love my damn squirrels. So this was our history. I still have my Packet Storm t-shirt somewhere. Evolve or die. This has to be our future. We don't have an option at all. We're not winning, let's be perfectly honest. Here's the logic. Let's focus on the first one for a second. I'll go back to Jesse, my Nebraska friend. Jesse collects John Deere tractors and hit-and-miss engines from the turn of the century. Jesse works in the engineering department at the train guys. He does electrical and mechanical engineering. He's freaking amazing at it. Jesse shoots, so do I. All these other things. He is basically a Nebraska boy through and through. Yet he and I have collaborated on some of the more successful hacks that I think we've done over the last 10 years. We've broken tractors, we've broken corn, we've broken aeroplanes, we've broken pretty much anything that's out there, because we approach it from very different perspectives. When you look to people to come into this world, if you're mentoring or bringing people into this environment, stop saying I don't have enough resources or I can't get enough people. Literally go down the unemployment line and find somebody who cares. Because we can teach the technology all day long, but what we need are people who cares, and we need people from different perspectives. I've got a bunch of people that I worked for in various teams of mine that come from welding, pipe fitting, home building backgrounds, that come from accounting backgrounds, that come from all sorts of diverse backgrounds and countries. That's what we have to have in this as we go forward. Because let's be honest, the last 25 years of us trying to figure this shit out, and we haven't really done a very good job, let's be honest. Irrespective of any of those things, race, color, creed, religion, faith, eye color, you get it. It's going to take all of us. And this isn't security's problem. It's not IT's problem. It's not the business's problem. This is all of us. We are all responsible. Neither is it the C-suite. As much as we want to blame leadership sometimes, it isn't. Somebody stood up to me the other day at a conference and they were like, well, I don't know how to start DevSecOps. I'm like, and they were a developer. I'm like, go talk to the security people. Well, they're in their own room. Well, go fucking knock on the door. Go invite yourself to one of their meetings. And the security team are like, well, developers are doing their own thing. Well, walk your sorry ass over the freaking corridor, bring donuts, sit in a meeting with them, and say hi. That's all it takes. Because this is what we're facing. 5 million apps, 6 billion connected people, way more flipping devices than we know what the hell to deal with, and illogically a shortfall in our industry, despite the fact there are 6 billion people on the planet that probably most of them want a decent job. Okay? We're not going to fix this on our own. This is for those of you that like security in our industry. Breaking this stuff is easy. It needs to be fixed. When somebody comes to you and says, hey, I figured out how to break it, well, congratulations. Now give me 4 or 5 ways to fix it. And by the way, help me to help you understand how to talk to leadership or management or users about it. This is my favorite one these days. I like this one. Let me read it for a second while I take a slurp. It is what it is. It's kind of relevant when you think about it for a whole bunch of different reasons. This country started by a bunch, well, it didn't start, it was already here, for crying out loud. This country was invaded by a bunch of people coming from my neck of the woods. A long, long time ago in the UK, we sent 2 sets of ships off. And we were like, okay, we'll send one set of ships that way and they can go off the edge of the bloody ocean, and we'll send the other set of ships that way and they can go off the edge of the bloody ocean. What happens? You buggers ended up here and the Australians ended up as well. The Australians beat the crap out of us at cricket all the damn time. And you invented something called American football, which is like football but completely different than football with shoulder pads. It's a little confusing. As individuals, we're going to fail. Simple as that. This is not a problem that we can fix on our own. It's also not a problem that we can fix as teams of security people or developers or network or whatever, or website of it. This has to be all of us together. It's the only way this is going to work. So, final slide. Always a squirrel, typically always Douglas Adams, let's be perfectly honest. So, I have managed to yak on for, what, about an hour? Yeah, almost exactly an hour. Questions. How do we want to do this? Do you want to do questions? Do we have time for questions? Questions. Go for it. Yikes, there are some questions.
No.
No, you have the microphone.
You gotta make me get my steps.
Also, because then I have to repeat the stupid thing.
How do you feel about password manager software? So software that stores all a department's or all an individual's password in one convenient
you know
location.
what? I have a love-hate with it. How many of you have seen the media? Was that last week when LastPass had to go, oops, guess what? I'm sorry, Google everything. I've got a love-hate with password managers. I don't use a password manager. I have, on that computer, all of my passwords written down. Now, to get into that computer, not only do you need 2 sets of passwords to get into the stupid thing which aren't written down. I have keyboard biometrics, so you actually have to type the password at the right cadence, otherwise it'll tell you to sod off. That's how I protect my stuff. Browsers remembering passwords, I mean, we all do it, let's be perfectly honest. It's convenience these days. I think there are some good password managers out there, and from a corporation standpoint, I think it's necessary, especially if you think about it. I mean, you've got shared admin passwords, you've got shared control passwords. What I don't like to see, and unfortunately when we've gone in and broken into places, is we'll find the password manager, and then we find the certificate 2 directories below it. It's like, yeah, you just failed. We love you, but you failed. Implemented correctly, I think they can work effectively. But again, it's only as strong as that weakest link. If the password to get into it or the cert to get into it isn't particularly well hidden, then there's a problem. Like the Google stuff, if the last pass is connected to your drive and you still share between the 2 systems, it's a problem. I like some of the one-time use pads. So there's password managers out there that generate a new account for each new use. Now, that doesn't work very well on flipping websites where it's like, hi, you can only use 8 characters. If any of you have developed websites where you can only use 8-character passwords, take yourself out into the rain and taser yourself, please. Oh, man. Especially in this day and age. You could be forgiven for it like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I think you've got to choose carefully. I mean, that's the other problem is as well, is there's so many. I mean, if you open up App Store, either Google's App Store, Android's App Store, or the Apple one, there's like 50 different password managers. We ended up doing a breach report to somebody fairly recently where they're like, well, we used the password manager. No, what you did is you downloaded the free one that was the database was being looked after in the Ukraine. Which bit of this doesn't add up? And so there's all the challenges that are around it. And then backing the stupid thing up. If you lose your password manager, thou art screwed. So it's an interim solution is about the best I can put it. I'm not keen on it. I actually have a lot of 2-factor stuff that goes to my phone. But again, that's not an ideal solution either, because all somebody's got to do is get hold of my phone, do a SIM copy on the phone, and then they can start getting the same SMS messages I do, which means they can get into the stupid system. It's not perfect. There is no perfect solution. That's the problem. I'm working with I'm working with 2 companies, one called Overwatch ID and another one called TrueSona, who actually approach it from very different ways. Overwatch tries to put this like layer of management over passwords, so you can interact with like the business passwords and your personal very seamlessly, and they do a really, really nice job of it. And then TrueSona basically builds an API where it's holding all the data and it just runs an API for authentication to and from wherever you need. Both different ways of approaching it, and they're sure as hell better than a lot of the systems out there. And there's another one. There's a bunch of folks I'm working with in Boulder at the moment, yeah, they haven't broken cover yet, but they've got another totally unique way of doing it. We don't have an ideal solution. I was talking last night to some of the folks here. I'm working on something at the moment that actually involves pulling signals out of the brain. So it's an EEG device that pulls recognition signals out of the brain as you walk up to a system that you have previously identified with. You recognize it, it recognizes you, no password is needed. I've actually got it working in my lab. I have another pair of glasses that have EEG monitors on them. As I walk up to them, it recognizes me. It's kind of like Tony Stark shit, but it's in reality, which means there's code and there's bugs. And if I'm stressed, or if I blink my eyes, the stupid thing doesn't work. So there's all sorts of fun things in there. But it's fun. So there's no easy solution. But I like them more than having them written on a sticky note. How about that? Yeah, please, for the love of all, whichever deity you want to respond to, stop putting passwords on sticky notes in your desks. When I break into your building at night, one of the first things I do is rifle through your drawers. Thank you for the snacks and the keys to the data center and all of your passwords. Okay, appreciate it. And by the way, locking those stupid things doesn't work. There are 4 or 5 pin lock, takes 15 seconds to break past. Okay, does that help? Nobody's going to let me in their building now, are they? Let's face it.
No.
All right, what else we got?
So you actually tipped on what I was going to ask you in regards to biometrics and nanotechnology, and you're testing that.
Yeah.
And are you comfortable with that idea, though? Because I would much rather have someone hack my computer than hack my body.
So this is where it gets really freaky and fun. It is kind of fun. Yeah, the hoodie goes up. Yeah, don't do that. I will shoot you. Remember, no, I don't. It's always a flesh wound. It's easier that way. That way people remember it. Side here or down here, it's a really good way of doing it. It's a good remember. And it's a Monty Python thing, so it's always got to be a flesh wound. All right, so let's see. Biometrics suck. Let's just be perfectly honest about that. Here's the problem. It's simple. If you lose your password, you can make another one. Yay! Isn't that easy? If you lose your fingerprint, you're screwed. How many of you were part of the OPM shenanigans when they lost everything? Yay, well done, OPM. Is anybody here part of OPM? We need to have a conversation. Okay, good. Yeah, biometrics. Okay, so here's the problem. I've got one of the newer iPhones, the stupid thing that needs facial recognition. I swear I just want to smack it against my forehead on a regular basis. How many of you who here has an Apple device that's got the facial recognition? Number one, we've been able to bypass it ever since they came out with it. It was kind of fun. It was easy to begin with. You literally showed it a picture and it went, oh, I know you. Then you had to do a picture with moving eyes and then it went, I know you. Then you had to do a 3D mask and it went, oh, I know you. So every time they come out, this is a game of chess. Security is nothing more than a game of chess. You make a move, I will counteract that move. And we're working on some new stuff to counteract some of the latest shit. And also, for those of you that maybe do sit in a car and go, shit, I need to look at my phone quickly, no longer can you just put your fingerprint on the stupid thing. Yes, you have to hold it here. It's like, great, now I can't see the traffic because the stupid phone needs to look at me, especially if it needs to answer a call. I hate it. But again, especially the beard. So when I just had the goatee, the phone actually kind of knew who I was. But then I started growing the sides out for the hell of it. I had no clue why. It's just fun to do. And it has no clue who I am. Or at nighttime, especially, if I'm working, I'm like at night, the stupid phone's like, I don't know who you are. You need to put your passcode in. I'm like, I hate you. Yeah. Now, the difference is with features. So our external body, we can't change certain features. Fingerprints, you have to go talk to intelligence agencies. They can eventually do it, but the mass population isn't going to do that. Facial features, the same thing. But there's other things that you can change, which is why I'm working on the EEG stuff. As humans, we are continually, some of us are continually thinking. Some of us are not, the ones that need to be told which end of the chainsaw to hold on to. So if you take that constant change, and it's a variance on normal. So we get a geeky for a second. So we all have a normal baseline. We know how we have variances on that baseline. If I can take your baseline and know the variances on the baseline, I can actually build a math algorithm that can talk to you and is a continual one-time use pad. In other words, you can't man in the middle it, you can't do any kind of a replay attack, etc., etc., etc. So there are ways past this whole biometric issue of one and done. So if I steal your biometric signal, I can't replay because you're continually changing. Especially if you walk up to a computer, I maybe can get you, but I can't get your experiences with that computer, which is what I'm capturing and replaying. That's what I'm basically building. And so there's ways to make it completely unique on a one-time use pad, but it's taken some work. It's kind of fun to do. It's a side project for me. But yeah, the fingerprint stuff I hate, the facial stuff I hate. There's some good stuff. There's one team which is actually working on cavity space in the head, which is really cool. They'll bounce a signal around on the head cavity and they'll build a signal on that, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure I want more signals bouncing around my head, but hey. There's one team which is working on like heart monitoring. In other words, we all have slightly different cyclical rhythms and all this kind of crazy stuff. There's some interesting stuff out there. Again, it's early days. Oh, nano shit's fun. Oh, I'm very fortunate. I was talking at a conference over in Israel. I've done it for a couple of years now. And a very, very dear friend of mine is a gentleman called Chris Nickerson. And he runs an amazing pen testing and red teaming company. And so there's three of us on stage. We have this amazing lady who is talking about the psychology behind hacking a human. So, or a human. Chris Nickerson stands up and talks about the social engineering side of hacking a human. I stand up, I'm like, screw it, let's hack the human. And we demonstrated how to take over some of the biotech that we had up there. And we had it with about $150 worth of Arduinos. And we actually took something that looks a bit between assembler and C, and we turned it into engineering language, in other words, gated machine language, and then we turned it into a frequency signal. We played that signal against a bunch of carbon nano stuff, and we got them to recompile their own attacks, so they weren't going after, at the time when we did it, they were looking at cancer cells, which is fantastic and amazing. We retuned them to look for red blood cells and kill them, which isn't so good for the human body. Yeah, not good. $150 worth of equipment. Yay! And I mean, they're sitting there with this research studio that's like filled with all sorts of shit like this, and we work in with basically a bunch of Arduinos. The other thing we did, and we borrowed it from some amazing people up in Canada, what we did is we impregnated, you know, Febreze, the smelly stuff, or like when the men go sit in the bathroom? We impregnated Febreze with carbon nanotubes. But what we ended up doing is we sent data, and it was amazing. We did some fun stuff. We actually took data, we encoded the data, we played the data over laser signals, and got it into the carbon architecture. We then impregnated Febreze with this stuff, and we sent it across an entire room. It was brilliant. And we told the military that, and they're like, "We hate you." I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's cute." We did the same thing with cockroaches, like 5 years ago. We dropped a whole bunch of cockroaches with embedded RFID tags and near-field communications. We dropped them into a data center, and then we harvested them 2 days later. And we took out a whole bunch of data from the data center. They were pissed. It was so much fun to do. So yeah, we, the human, is nothing more than, let's face it, a walking USB stick. Welcome to the next century. There's a bunch of things. I mean, it's fun, and this is my challenge. You know, we look at technology now, and we're still having problems that we should have solved 20 odd years ago. Yet technology, I mean, we can't keep up. That's part of the problem. You know, I'm working on technology now that in 10 years or 15 years time should hit the market, and we're talking about literally synthesizing a human. I mean, that's fantastic, and it's amazing. Yet we can't get past password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and fucking 6. I'm like, we're screwed. And then we talk about barriers. You know, again, as humans, we're really good at building up barriers. Yet if you start looking at how we're synthesizing technology in humans, there will be no barriers. How the hell do we deal with that? It was kind of fun. So yeah, sorry, squirrels. Now you see why I have squirrels on the computer. Other questions? Go for it, come on. There's other people are thinking the same question, but nobody wants to ask it. I actually do appreciate the fact that it is a room not completely full of men. Sorry, I hate to say it, but we're bad. Testosterone gets in the way, and we're like, oh, we don't want to ask the question because we don't want to look foolish to everybody.
Thanks for coming across the room again. Hello.
Hello.
So, you know, a lot of us are government, and government tends to be kind of behind the times. Unfortunately, I know that nowadays it's like really on everyone's mind because we're now getting attacked because we're, you know, behind. It happens to us.
If it's any consolation, you aren't the only ones getting attacked because you're behind. Education's getting its ass handed to it. Healthcare's had its ass handed to it for about the last 5 years or so because they weren't just behind, they were just ignorant and didn't want to fix it. Critical infrastructure is a complete mess. So you aren't the only ones that are screwed, so don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
See, I can be nice and encouraging at times.
Oh, yes, that was very encouraging. So positive. So, since we're in government and we might be working in, with less resources, and we often have to go to open source because it's inexpensive. We're also being asked, please do more open data. People want us to be sharing with the public information that they feel like they're privileged to. Is there any recommendations for us being government specifically that we can do with, the fact that we're relying on open source and things like that?
So I actually love open source. That picture I had up there with the great big snap-on toolbox, most of the tools I use are open source tools, because as a community, we've done a lot to actually build that tool set up. Now, from the defensive standpoint and from the ability to understand that, you've got Oauth. How many of you are familiar with Oauth? Okay, for those of you that are not familiar with Oauth, please get familiar with Oauth. Also, I put Mitre up there. That's another one. That's a huge resource to understand the attacker methodology and the defensive methodology. It's all open source. But Oauth is all fully open source technology, and they're amazing. They've got the ability to demonstrate how all the web applications and everything else is out there. There are a wealth of tools and technologies out there for open source use. It's also really, really, really imperative to look at somebody called Sonatype. They actually support the all-day DevOps and the DevSecOps stuff, but go do some research on Sonatype. And the reason I say that, we all like borrowing code from the internet. But the problem is we don't know the vulnerabilities that come with that. We don't know when it gets updated, adds, moved, or changes. What Sonatype does is they track a lot of that. So they track, hey, you've just downloaded this code, it's vulnerable. And they keep an eye on that stuff. So get to know the folks over at Sonatype really, really well. From a defensive standpoint, there's a ton out there. So in our world, we have PeerList, which is basically, it's like LinkedIn for geeks, but it's open to anybody. And we talk a lot about how to defend, how to attack, what tools, what technologies, all the open source stuff that's out there. So PeerList, P-E-E-R-L-Y-S-T, huge resource out there for all those kinds of tools and technologies. And again, it's an open source community. There is a much, much bigger movement now for like logging and monitoring. So Greylog, all open source. Snort, all open source. They've made commercial versions, but there's a ton of open source stuff out there. If you want to do a lot of work and figure out all of your intelligence, in other words, who's looking at me, whatever else is, you have the community editions of like Multigo and Perturba. Again, open source capabilities. Some of it, a lot of it is grabbing, thanks to the board folks here, and that lunatic especially, Greg especially, for dragging my sorry ass in here, because you need people like me to go, hey, here's 10 different resources, have at it. When you've exhausted those, come back and I'll give you more. That's my job. I'm not messing around. When I say security needs everybody to help, well, guess what? This is part of the outreach to go, hey, how can I help you guys get better? I apologize for some of the swear words, but I really don't apologize because I'm trying to be nice about things. And I really do mean it. If anybody needs a taser, I'm happy to give you one. And I can give you one of the tasers without the marked dots as well. So nobody will know in the middle of the night when you taser somebody in a dark alley. All right, but yeah, there's a ton of open source stuff out there. And if you need a list of it, hit me up on LinkedIn, grab a card, yell at him to give me a contact. I got no problem sharing at all. Does that help? Cool. What was the other part of it? It was open source technology. What else was it? Open data. Yeah, open data is a tough one. You really are caught between a rock and a hard place because the public's going, we want to know everything. And those of us that are on the adversarial community are like, yeah, go on, share everything, thanks. There's no easy solution. There really isn't. Arguably, at this point in time, all of the data's out there anyway, whether it's from you or 10 other sources. So you're doing nothing more than just adding to the collective, unfortunately. It's not an easy one. The only thing you can do is educate people. Hey, I am happy to share this data with you. here are the consequences or potential consequences, here are the potential risks, but you need to do it in a way that they understand. And if they accept the risks, then so be it. All you can then do is literally put a safety net underneath them that when they trip, they don't fall too far. This is always one of those things we talk about vendors. You know, we all have a love-hate relationship with vendors and suppliers. They don't necessarily always adhere to the same rules and regulations, so when they screw up, the best you can do is limit the exposure of the damage they cause. And it's the same thing with data sometimes, especially in the government side. It's like, I don't want to hand this to you, but I'm getting yelled at because some Supreme Court said, oh, it all has to be handed over. Well, I'm going to, and I'm just going to build a safety net so that when your sorry dumbass puts it on an open S3 bucket and the entire world gets to it, it's a limited amount of exposure. Does that make sense? It's about the best we can do. Sorry. Other questions?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for taking your time and sharing your time and expertise with us.
Thank him.
Today.
It's all his fault.
As the majority of us in the room do work for government, the public sector, a lot of us inspired by serving the common good, and our missions in our different organizations, is there a community of folks such as yourself who are also inspired or motivated by serving the common good? And while a lot of our organizations can't necessarily pay for the expertise,
a lot of us give our time either for free or, hey, just cover our costs.
so that was the point of my question is there this community? We've got similar, like Code for America, we have other folks who navigate between the private sector, public sector, tours of duty, if you will. If such a community or organization exists, what is it and how do we connect with them?
So the best way to do it is, because you're from, I'm assuming, all over the country, yes?
Yes.
Good. So look up the B-sides community. It's called B-sides, as in B-sides of a record. Just B-sides. It's a security, we have conferences all over the US. They are all over the US. We had the one in Denver last week. I think it was Security B-sides was last Friday or something like that. They're all over the place. I tend to bounce around to different ones and just go hang out and have fun. I want to say in the US, there's a bunch. I mean, there's like 50 or 100 of the damn things. And it's all security folks just want to hang out, want to share information, and just want to be. So that's one. In November, there is all-day DevOps or all-day DevSecOps Day. It is 24 hours, and there's 150 of us giving talks in that 24-hour period. It's free. It's online. Register. Come hang out. Come listen. It's totally free. It's a free online conference. It's actually run by the guys over at Sonatype, who do a lot of the sponsoring for like all-day DevOps, DevSecOps, and everything else. It's a totally free resource. It's recorded. Just come hang out. And there's 150 of us which are doing speaking engagements. There's a bunch of us who have done it, last year, we're doing it again this year. I think up to this point there's like 10 or 12,000 people registered. I think last year we ended up with like 30 or 40,000 people. And just come and listen. It's all, not podcasts, it's all online, obviously. I think they ask you to register. Feel free to use fake identities. I really don't care. But it's one of those things where the resources are definitely there for that. The other good one, quite honestly, is LinkedIn. How many of you have got LinkedIn profiles? Yeah, start talking. I mean, I'm out there fairly bluntly. Mark Miller's out there. Chris, there's so many of us out there that are happy to take time and share. Or other people will know other groups. Put a post out there and tag a few of us and go, hey, look, I'm looking for resources in the government sector of people that can help us. There's a ton of us that are happy to do it. I tend to give most of my time to the National Guard. I have a soft spot for them for all sorts of different reasons. So I do Cyber Yankee, I do Cyber Shield, I do all the planning for that one. I go out to the National Guard annual conferences and I cause chaos and mayhem. I get to annoy generals, which is, now I'm not in a uniform, is freaking hilarious. It's so much fun. So there's a lot of us out there. Because again, I think most of us go like, look, we can't fix this freaking problem ourselves. We're not winning. how the hell can we bring as many people to the table and go, look, number one, I'm sorry, we're not the special snowflakes, but number two, how can I help you understand where our challenges are, and how can you help me understand what I need to do to help you with, if that makes sense. It's a two-way street. Does that make sense? Hence my thing with the questions. You've got the hacker in the room, ask the fucking questions. By the way, for the men in the room, please realize the only questions that have been asked have been all by women so far. Hint, hint. Yeah, sorry. I'm going to harp on about it because it pisses me off, I'll be perfectly honest.
I did find that amusing, but that's me, and you all know me.
All right, other questions? We've got some time. Go for it.
Oh, I was going to say, come on, guys, we've got the hacker in the room.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
So a lot of things you talked about is being more human with our employees, getting and reminding them about security continually, not just that once a year.
Yeah.
What do you think about tools like the know-befores, the things that get out there and just continually barrage and people with fish campaigns?
The fish me's, the know befores,
exactly.
and all the other ones. You know, I have a love-hate with that stuff. And it's tough because, again, as internal people, we have limited resources. So if you can have somebody do the continual phishing, that's great. The problem is you've got to get everybody to an initial baseline. And sometimes it's better to have that come internally. In other words, I mean, just sitting down with people and going, hey, look, let me just help you understand. Let me help you explain. Mark Miller and I and a couple of others have this entire year put monthly calendar reminders out on LinkedIn. And we've done it. It's like a one-pager. You know, it's January. Don't click on the IRS. It's February. Nobody loves you. You know, and it's just, sorry. But it's true. You know, and so we've put that stuff out there. It's free for anybody to use. I would love to be able to walk into an environment and go, hang on, you were the silly son of a bitch. Yeah, that'd be us. Great, I'm glad you're using it. So that stuff's free. And same thing, you know, if you can take the people that work with you and just sit down with the team, and people are like, well, how do I go talk to finance? Get off your ass, walk your steps, sit down in the finance meeting and go, hey, I would love to just hang out with you. I'd love to learn what you do, but I'd also like to share some lessons that we're trying to teach people. How can we do that successfully? I mean, that's all it takes. And I think then when you get people to a base level, using the know-befores and using the fish me's and a bunch of the other stuff that's out there, I think is really good. Because it keeps people thinking. The one big thing I think that a lot of us tend to forget is you will never fix the human. That won't ever happen. You can teach people not to click on the PayPal, eBay, company reset passwords, but I bet you a year's salary that if I spoofed where your kid goes to school and I said, hey, there's been a bit of a problem here, there's this and this, and here's the report for the kid that's now in hospital, please give us a call, here's the number. Every single last freaking one of us would click that link, me included. Because you find that one thing that triggers the human. So you'll never get away from the human problem. I mean, the thing is, you'll take the bar from down here to here. Great, that's success. Now it's just keeping people educated and keeping people more sophisticated. When you've got the bar to here, what you hope is that, back to what I was saying, we're always going to get in, how are you going to know, what are you going to do about it, comes into play. But you'll never ever fix the person, to be honest. And quite honestly, we don't need fixing, we just need help. You know, it's a safety conversation, not a security conversation. So I like all that stuff, but it costs money. So it's like, okay, what can we do? How can we do grassroots? How can we do grungy things? How can we go to B-sides, which are free, and educate ourselves? How can we do all-day DevOps and educate ourselves? How can we go online? There is a ton of stuff, even online. I mean, all you've got to do is Google security, free security awareness, and there's shed ton loads of stuff online that somebody can, I mean, a lot of you are on the coding, programming, web development side of things. Building something internally that's just a fun portal for education could be done quickly and successfully, and it would probably be a fun grunge project. So just things like that I think help a lot. Does that help? Cool. Other questions? Go for it. Just fed up of being called out.
You touched upon it a little bit before, but just as a basic question.
Yeah.
Any recommendations for passwords for us, for our employees, for our families, for our kids?
Yeah. How many of you follow XKCD online? All right, those of you that follow, teach the people that don't follow to follow XKCD. We'll start with that one. So XKCD did it really nicely. They talked about passphrases. And they talked about if your system is set up that it can accept a passphrase. So we all talk about passwords. We're like, oh, let's make it 8 characters. Well, that gets past some of the windows. Well, let's make it 15 characters. None of that stuff really works, let's be perfectly honest. So you start looking at passphrases. We all know the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy fence or the lazy dog or whatever the hell it was. But if you take 4 or 5 words, you know, the yellow submarine ate a pink turtle, or the yellow submarine ate a gherkin, or something like that. Just stuff you can remember, stuff you can think about. Using a passphrase, I'm never going to crack that passphrase. Snowball's chance in hell with the computing power that we currently have. It just isn't going to happen. If you wonder why I talk about XKCD, simply Google XKCD and password, just those 2 words. I'm not even going to give you the link because you don't want to accept a web link from a hacker, let's be perfectly honest. Just Google XKCD and password and you'll understand exactly what I mean. But take a passphrase, and it's 4 or 5 words that you can remember that are maybe trigger words. You know, the brown horse leapt over the Mercedes, or the BMW if you're into that, or the Chevy if you're American. Ford, Chevy, slight war. So just something fun. That's always a good start. That's number 1. Number 2, if you have to use a password, the way I tend to do it, which is probably giving stuff away and I really don't care, is if it's a website that it's like, okay, it's a bank website or it's like Amazon or something like that, I'll use the word of the site in the middle of my password. But I'll maybe change 1 or 2 things in it. And then on either side of it, I've got special characters or letters. So I always kind of know what I'm looking at, but there's always enough of like a building block around it that helps. So let's just say I bank with Citibank. So maybe it's just, you know, uppercase, you know, exclamation mark, @ and a couple of other things. Then, you know, C, uppercase C, C1, T, Y, B, @NK, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. It's still got the bank in there, so I know what the hell I'm looking at. It's got some special characters, and I can maybe use similar ones, but it pads it out enough. It's like salting the hashes, but doing it so you can visually see the stupid thing. And it does enough complexity, the snowball's chance in hell of actually breaking the bloody thing. The problem we will always have is I don't have to break the password. If I got to your computer, I can take it's called pass the hash. So you've already authenticated. I can unfortunately take your authentication session and pass it along and literally piggyback underneath you. So you'll never get away from that, unfortunately. You will. 2-factor authentication will help you on that one. Which comes to 2FA. I use Google's 2FA and I use somebody else's, Microsoft's, I think, because the company's got like whatever the hell it is, Office Exploder or something. So we use that as well. Is it a pain in the ass? Yeah, it can be. You know, hey, I'm sending a code to your phone. Hoy vey. But you know what? I kind of care about it enough. So it's a balancing game. My phone, I have passcode on my phone. It's 6 characters long. It's something that I know, and it doesn't follow a specific pattern. For those of you that have Android, you can draw all sorts of kind of cool patterns. Draw a cool pattern. Don't just go, that doesn't work. And by the way, when I'm looking over your shoulder in the airplane, don't do it, because I'm looking over your shoulder in the airplane. Okay, too many times. I actually sat and watched somebody. They were running the Pentagon software. It's freaking hilarious. I'm sitting on the airplane, and I look up, and I'm like, oh, I recognize that software, and it's, you know, the Pentagon 2000 and whatever it is software. And I'm watching them, and I'm watching them log in, and I get about halfway through the plane. I'm like, look, I can't just sit there and do anything long. And I just tap on the shoulder. I hand them one of my not regular Ativo business cards, and I'm like, you might want to consider actually A, a privacy screen, and B, probably making your password more complex. The rest of the airplane ride was really uncomfortable. Yeah, that's all good fun. Again, the 4 quadrants. And so how many of you are involved in or understand the idea of data management and data separation, segmentation, integrity management? Again, if you think about data, you break data into 4 quadrants. There's the data. You don't care if somebody stands on the street corner and yells at the top of their voice. Same with passwords. I don't care if somebody breaks the frickin' password to get into my King Supers. Have a nice day, enjoy the points. Then there's the data. You're like, look, I'm going to tell you it, and if you tell anybody, I'm going to tase you, sorry ass, but I kind of trust you. There's that level of data. Same thing with passwords. You know, that's maybe, I have Great Danes. They eat more food than I do, and so I have to get a refill from a couple of places on a regular basis. I kind of care about those passwords, but I kind of really don't care about those passwords. Then there's the shit I really care about, my bank account, you know, my Apple stuff and all the other stuff. Those are the passwords, and that's the data that I really, really care about. That shit doesn't need to be out on the internet anywhere, or on a cloud preferably. Then there's the stuff that's like plutonium level data. That's the nasty stuff. That's the stuff you bribe the senators with data. That's all the good stuff, okay? Those are the passwords that are your company ones. So they all need to have their own little parcels, and they all need to be relatively unique, if that makes any sense. So I would break it down that way, but seriously, XKCD and passwords does a really nice job of explaining passphrases. Does that help? Cool. Oh, we actually had this discussion last night. I think NIST actually changed their regulation on when they think passwords need to be changed instead of this 30, 60, 90 day shit. It's like, we're going to break the stupid things, or we'll pass the hash. Let's make them a little longer between changes, because it doesn't change anything, let's be perfectly honest. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's, again, I don't like passwords. I'm working on ways of getting rid of them. Basically, our existence becomes our unique ability to get into things, but we're a few years out from that. What else we got? I'm out of time. I need to shut the hell up and get off stage. All right, thank you very, very much, everybody. Thank you very, very much.
All right, let's do some looking at people's cool shirts that they wore. Yeah.